strategy is basically your way of learning about the market, learning about the world. And the faster you are, the better you are going to be able to compete in that market.
Welcome back to our community news desk here at the Microsoft 365 Community Council, powered by Shure. My name is Karuana Gatimu. I'm the Director of Customer Advocacy for Microsoft for all things Microsoft 365, AI, collaboration, and all the good toys that you know and love. I'm so excited to have you here. We're really invested in bringing you thought leaders that can help you during this transition in the era of AI. And I have someone who I had the opportunity to meet in Davos, at UnDavos, and the World Economic Forum this year, and I knew that our audience needed to hear from him. And his name is Dan Toma. Dan, thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having me over.
Oh, I'm so excited for you to be here and share your insights. You are an award-winning author. You've written 2 different books. Tell folks about what you do and about your books, please.
Yeah, more by chance than by design, to be honest with you. I'm an engineer by trade, electronics and telecommunication. So yeah, a lot of tech stuff. But then at one point, I was working a lot of startups. And I was obviously fascinated by how we build products and how we build products in the startup world, how we build business models, how we innovate. Then at one point, I got headhunted by a large telco company. And I honestly wanted to quit my job 3 weeks in. Why? Because the way we were building products in this large organization setting was exactly the opposite of what we were used to in the startup world. In the startup world, you're used to, understanding the problem, understanding the customer, then building something small, trying it, and then scale, maybe go to a VC, ask for budget, right? Now, in the corporate world, we're doing exactly the same, but in reverse order. We're asking a lot of budget at the beginning from the CFO. Then we were coding and putting together a pilot. And then when the pilot failed, we were looking at the customer and trying to understand what their problem is. So when I joined that company, the mandate was to change this process. And I was actually documenting a lot of things I was doing. And one thing led to the other. I was speaking at conferences, keeping a blog up. I decided to put everything together in a book, together with other people that have seen the same or had the same experiences. And this was the first book. And then from there, we moved to the second book, which is my love story, if you want, with numbers. Innovation accounting. How do we measure innovation? Now I'm working with large organizations, helping them make growth a repeatable, scalable, and measurable process.
I love that. What I love about Dan is his real-world practical advice. I'm a project manager at heart and a business solution architect, and so I need a plan that someone can actually action. I find now that people's projects can get off track because they don't have some of those things. What are some of the things that leaders are doing right now in this particular time with AI from a project perspective that you wish that they would stop doing?
Yeah, I think they're overly planning to some extent. They are starting these projects with a very, very concrete plan of what they're going to do 5 weeks and 2 days in. And I think that's the wrong approach. That was the wrong approach 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's even worse now with AI, right? Because the speed now is so much faster than it used to be. So yeah, I would definitely encourage everyone to stop planning. I'm not saying now, okay, let's be Wild West here and shoot from the hip. On the contrary, I think we need to have a smart way of planning. Particularly create the goal and then work backwards from the goal. Be flexible in your approach.
Agility is a big topic in a lot of organizations, and I think you're hitting on that right now. What about developing agility are you seeing people do well in the world? You work with so many different organizations and on a global basis. Share with the audience here what they should be doing in addition to changing their planning process.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of things that need to change, right? I mean, every organization suffers from their own, thing, right? Everybody has their own mistakes, and they live by those. Obviously, planning is one. Then I would look into strategy and budgeting. Gone are the days when you can have a 5-year strategic plan. I mean, look at 2026. And imagine yourself back in January. Imagine us in January in Davos. What were the problems that we were talking about? Where was the world then? Where is the world now?
That's right.
And it's been 3 months. It's been a quarter, basically,
exactly.
right?
I say this to people all the time. Your 5-year plan doesn't work. I don't think your 3-year plan works either.
No.
I really think this idea of doing true agile planning is so important. But what about connecting that to business goals? Is that essential? How are people doing that?
100%, 100%. That needs to be connected with what you're trying to achieve, and your goals need to evolve with the context that you're operating in. If that context changes, change the way you operate, change your strategy. You should have continuous strategy feedback loops. No longer annual or by 5 years, whatever it used to be, right? I don't even know what it used to be.
Because we can't remember because we're too busy dealing with what's happening right now.
Exactly.
So we don't know what happened 5 years ago.
I mean, strategy is basically your way of learning about the market, learning about the world. And the faster you are, the better you are going to be able to compete in that market. It's not going to be the organizations that have access to the latest technology. I was just explaining recently that everybody has access to the same technology basically nowadays, so technology won't be a competitive advantage. So where's the competitive advantage? Well, the competitive advantage is in your learning cycles. How fast is your organization able to learn and adapt based on what they've learned, regardless if it's a technology, if it's a certain geopolitical context, if it is anything else in between.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that more. And, that's based on the data and the evidence that comes from the engagements you have, from the work that we do in our customer base. That's so key. I think you said something that I wanted a deep dive on a little bit, and you talked about feedback loops for your strategy. What does that look like? How does anybody do that?
Right. So, again, we worked in banking, we worked in pharma, we worked with a lot of organizations. In banking, for example, we used to have a client back in the day in the Nordics. I'm not going to mention name; it's not relevant, right? It used to be. I mean, it still is one of the largest banks in the region. The idea was that they were creating a very, very simple growth strategy, and in that they had two categories: things we are going to deliberately do, and things we are deliberately not going to do. They were then investing in ideas, teams, maybe external collaborations for the things that they said specifically they're going to do, and then review that through their governance and taking investment decisions on a constant basis. Every 8 months, they would come back and analyze the entire portfolio. And once they analyze the entire portfolio, they would basically say, look, we said that we're going to do some things. Apparently, these are not working out. How about we move them to the list of things we're not going to do? And pick up some of the things we said we're not going to do, move them to the forefront, experiment on those. Or maybe bring in new things. Because the technology evolved, or the economic context has evolved, or the geopolitical context has evolved. So this is how it works. It starts from the teams and goes all the way to strategy.
That is brilliant and a fantastic model. We'll be talking more about that and more sorts of models and learning on our Leading in the Era of AI page that you can find on adoption.microsoft.com. That's so important to lean into these AI governance councils that are really strategy councils for your organization. And maybe you're not accountable for the entire strategy of your organization. You can do this for your team. I'll tell you that my team has now moved to doing this every 6 months. We have what we affectionately refer to as the keep kill list, right? And we review what we're doing, we review the impact numbers, and we look at our backlog and we make the adjustments. And, we used to do that annually. Microsoft has always been pretty fast at doing that sort of thing because we are a tech company and because of budgets, as you mentioned. But at the same time, I think that moving to that 6-month cycle has really helped us also deal with the pace of change in more effective ways. So I'd love to hear you talk about that. You also said a word that's near and dear to my heart that I have been talking about almost my entire career, and that is governance. You know, governance sometimes when you talk about Microsoft 365 is about the technical governance of how you deploy SharePoint and Teams and channels, but you're talking about something a little bit different. Help our audience understand that.
Yeah, so whenever we talk about governance in the work that we do, we're referring to governance as our decision-making playbook, if you want, for all things growth. It might be AI, it might be product development, it might be expanding to a new market or trying to expand to another geography, whatever it is. You have to have very clear set of decisions and very clear set of questions you're asking yourself along the way, so that you know that you're heading in the right direction. Because if the answer to some of those questions early on is negative, then you should probably pull the plug and not venture down that road. Try to pivot, try to move to something more promising, or at the very least, just stop the bleeding then and there.
Sometimes people have the hardest time stopping something that they started.
Yes.
Because people are emotional creatures, whether we like to understand that or not. We actually are emotional creatures, and we get invested in the things we're doing. And also from a internal perspective, leaders have reputation tolls that they'll take when the culture doesn't allow for experimentation.
In organizations, big organizations, everybody says, oh, it's difficult to raise money for a new idea. But sometimes it's more difficult to stop getting money for the ideas that you are already working on.
That may or may not be
They
working.
may, or exactly.
That's interesting. Some of the organizations that we get to work with, they have actually an innovation fund. Mm-hmm. And it is a percentage of their revenue, their net revenue, that they automatically divert to innovation. Do you think that's a good idea?
For sure, innovation needs to have a guarded or a fenced budget. Otherwise, it's going to be probably the last dog at the ball, right?
Right, exactly.
Why? Because for so many years, innovation wasn't seen as a business critical function. For a zillion reasons, and I don't want to go into that. But nowadays, innovation is needed more than ever, right? With new technologies that you want to tap into, new markets that you're trying to enter, or old markets you're trying to exit. Who's going to provide the answers there? The guys in innovation. They have all the tools, they have all the knowledge, all the skill to help you do that.
That's absolutely true. And do you feel that focus on innovation now is more critical because of the market disruptions that are happening because of AI, but also geopolitical situations, et cetera? There's a lot of disruption happening in the world right now. We're going through a lot of change. And how do you feel like people and organizations are responding to that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously the pattern that I'm seeing, it's not really encouraging for people that are in new product development or innovation, because whenever there is disruption in the market, regardless if it is political, economical, technological, or a mix of the three, the go-to behavior, if you want, of leadership teams is to double down on the core business, which I understand, right? We're talking about listed companies. They have to live by a certain random expectation of a certain analyst on a certain street. Keeping that aside, it makes sense to focus on the core business. However, you have to do that, but not at the expense of your future growth. So you don't have to sacrifice your pension to have a bigger salary today.
Exactly. I love that idea. And I also think it's important for people to have time for that mindfulness to actually think about AI, not as a bolt-on to their existing business or process, but to truly reinvent what they're doing and have it add to the top line. Do you agree?
100%. I mean, at Outcome, the company that I run, this is basically our mission, to make growth repeatable and scalable and have the innovation function be a business critical function. We have had examples of organizations during COVID where very future-looking, very future-leaning executives, when COVID came, the first thing they did, they went to the innovation department. We need solutions. but this was just one in many organizations. Unfortunately, the majority were slashing the innovation budget, slashing R&D, moving everything to core. I don't know how many of them survived and how many of them are still around, but the approach that needs to be seen at that level is whenever we have a problem, let's invite innovation at least in the conversation. Not put the entire burden of the problem on their shoulders, but at least have them part of the solution finding committee.
Exactly. And that which means you should have a solution finding committee as a part of your
100%.
governance and strategy function. I think that's so key. If there's an actionable thing that you would tell our audience about right now for them, again, some of them who are going to be hearing you today have accountability for their entire department or their entire AI investment. Some of them are running a piece of it, or they're running user enablement or what have you. What do you think is an activity or an action that these folks can take to help move this transition forward in a more measurable and meaningful way?
Yeah, first and foremost, it's mindset, I would say. So look at your mindset, understand your mindset, and understand the fact that AI should not be treated as a typical technology rollout project or plan or implementation, because it's inherently different. It has feedback loops that you need to consider whenever you are planning. I'm seeing a lot of organizations not including feedback loops whenever they roll out a certain AI piece of technology, regardless if it is for mails or it is a chatbot or whatever. They don't do those loops. AI is powerful because of those feedback loops, because it learns and because it continuously learns. So you have to include that. So that would be my first advice. And my second advice is never forget your end goal. Why are you trying to do that particular implementation? What is the job to be done? What are you trying to achieve as an organization? What's the ultimate goal? And then work your way back to what will the technology look like. It's very easy as an engineer to get caught up in the conversation. Where will the buttons go and what LLM model we're going to use? It's a great conversation, but if we don't have the bigger conversation, what we're trying to achieve, we're always going to be left at that level, and 90% of the projects usually fail.
That's correct.
MIT said it, not Dan.
You're absolutely right. MIT did say it. And I think this is so true. That lack of vision and connection to measurable business result is a real killer for innovation and having innovation be a meaningful part of your business. And that's why your book, Innovation Accounting, is so important. And we highly recommend it. You'll be able to find a link to that in the description of this particular video. Follow Dan. I invented a new term with Dan, and it's called deep scrolling. You're familiar with doom scrolling, but I'm calling it deep scrolling, because if you go to his LinkedIn and start scrolling through, he will take you down a rabbit hole that will expand your mind and your leadership skills. So make sure that you do that. Let's skip the doom scrolling. We'll do the deep scrolling instead. Dan, I want to really thank you for taking your time to be with us today. I know everyone is going to get so much from your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. That's another episode of our Community News Desk reporting. We like to bring you the makers that are driving change in this era of AI. My name is Karuana Gatimu. I'm always happy to be with you. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you again soon.